everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. As always, I am deeply grateful for every week when you guys tune in, and it is always my prayer that the conversation that we're bringing to you today will bring you a dose of hope and inspiration wherever you are in your own grieving process. I am so excited to introduce my guest to you today. I have Kristen Rupprecht with me today. She is the owner of Nobly, a behavior brand with a mission to spread her message about emotional awareness across the globe so that others will awaken to their higher self and have guidance on their healing journeys. Facing a dark time of depression, loss, and grief in 2017 after the loss of her own brother is what catapulted Kristen on a healing path to emotional freedom and divine alignment with her purpose. Through her own transformation, she was called to serve others through coaching, speaking, and creating emotional awareness education so that others could learn from her experiences. Kristen believes everyone was born noble, and it is through our most challenging life experiences that we find our way back to who we really are. And you are just the perfect guest for our own mission on this podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Susan. I'm thrilled to be here. This is right up my alley.
I know. Me too. So we're going to just jump right into your story because you and I had a few minutes to talk prior to recording the episode. And so I know that your own grief journey brought you to where you are today. So please, can you start with your story of your loss in 2017?
Absolutely. Yeah, so in 2017 was just a huge shift for me. It literally, you like picked me up, turned me over, and took me out. And I had kind of a triple storm going on. My brother was really struggling with addiction to alcohol, and he ended up passing. And at the same time, I was going through a divorce. And then, really shortly after the loss of my brother, I lost a job, which I really loved. So it was this triple storm that happened all within like a 3-month period. And it was just too much for my nervous system to handle. And I just shut down in like what I would say a pile of grief, right? A pile of grief and loss. And for probably 3 months, I was in bed, just like I had 2 dogs. So thank God, I would get up, I'd have my coffee, I'd walk my dogs, I'd come back to bed. And then I think later I was living on coffee, basically, and ice cream. I'd go get ice cream in the afternoon. And that was it. And I was trying to make sense of what was happening to me. And it felt like not only had everything just been pulled out from under me, like everything I knew, every direction that I was going in my life was shifting, but I wasn't quite tapped into all of it. And so because it was almost like it was like my consciousness blew open, if that makes sense. I felt this, it was an awakening. And it was through this journey of grief that it broke me open. And so that's the most, I think, important part of, the work that you do and the work that I do as an emotion coach is just understanding like that we have these shadows, and grief can be a really big part of that. But grief is also, I think, I hate to say as painful as it is what finally breaks people open and gets us to like have the light, like can finally shine in on all the things that you've buried. And so that's what happened to me. I just finally started to understand that a lot of the pain in my life through my marriage, my relationships, how I was handling things is that I wasn't feeling my feelings. I was emotional, sensitive, empathic, but I never was really processing it. And I think that this was the catalyst for it. And so as I started to learn and come out of that and heal is when I realized, oh my gosh, like I had no emotional awareness of how to actually get through challenging times versus run from it.
Yeah, and I write a very similar piece in my book around how grief lights your heart up in fire and all of your demons come crawling out of the corners. And you can't, it really is an opportunity to look at everything. And it's terrifying at the very same time, because I'm thinking about these losses of losing your brother, going through a divorce and losing a job. Any one of those losses can really take someone out at the knees. And I appreciate the crawling into bed and having because I'm a huge dog fan. I have always had a dog, and that they do get you out. You don't have a choice. They have to be exercised. And of course, we talk about the three biggies during grief, right? Make sure that you're eating well, make sure you're exercising, and make sure you're getting sleep. The three things that you almost don't do any of those things when you're you're either sleeping all the time or you don't sleep at all. So what I'm interested in this part of your story, when you're going through all of these things at the same time, you are debilitated emotionally. What was the first step that you took? What helped you to begin to get out of this very dark place where you decided that you wanted to rejoin the living, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home, so I did have faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was this turning point within that process. I remember laying there just kind of, praying or thinking to myself, like, what is it going to take so that I don't ever have to feel this way again? And it's almost like I heard this voice say forgiveness.
Mm.
And it was at the time, of course, because I had all these patterns of like people pleasing. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to go out and forgive everyone else that I was holding all this resentment for. But what I've learned since then is it was truly like forgiving myself.
Yeah.
It's really like you've got to have self-love and compassion for yourself and rebuild. And then the other thing that I had to do, which I think really is the answer to your question, was I had to take a look in the mirror and own all of my bullshit, all of it, everything that I had contributed to the contamination of whatever it was in my life, like basically self sabotage, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what depression is. My battle was depression. And what I was realizing was it was all these emotions that I held and I turned against myself. So it was just removing one by one, all the things that I had to own. So it was taking ownership, I guess, for my emotions is what finally pulled me out of it rather than blaming everything else. Well, I feel this way because I lost my job. I feel this way because my brother died. I feel this way because I'm getting a divorce. Well, true. Like you said, anybody going through any of those things, or even just one, is monumental.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized is this was the magnitude of what it was going to take to get my attention and turn it back to myself.
Okay, so I mean, and I can understand that, right? Like we all can have these enlightened moments, our epiphanies, our awakenings, whatever language you want to put to that sort of that turning point. And you said that you heard forgiveness. So you had talked about feeling like you just really didn't want to get out of bed. So you hear this voice around forgiveness. What did you do next? What does that look like, right? Because we don't go from that debilitated feeling to all of a sudden you jump out of bed and you're like, I got this. So like what did if we could slow down your journey a little bit, what did it look like?
Yeah. So there was another key component to it is because
Mm-hmm.
I felt this big transformation happening where there was a disconnect from, so even though I had lost that job, what I started thinking in my head was, well, maybe that's not what I'm supposed to be doing anyway. Right. And then it was like, even my friendships didn't feel connected anymore. Like no one understood the magnitude of what I was going through. So interestingly, I went to see a psychic
Mm-hmm.
and she gave me a lot of information that I guess I wasn't prepared for, but that I needed to hear. And the two things that she said is that I was going through a spiritual awakening
Mm-hmm.
and that I was in my dark night of the soul. To both
Mm-hmm.
which I said, "Oh my God, what the hell is that?"
Yeah.
Right? And I came home and I Googled it, and from there is what I realized what was happening and what I needed to do, which was I was just coming to higher states of consciousness around like who I really was and what really mattered in the world. And, all the things that I'd been chasing externally were not the answer. And honestly, it actually validated so much of what I felt my whole life, which was I did everything I was supposed to do because I struggled with perfectionism based on my upbringing. So I was like, okay, I got the good grades and I got to college and I got the job and I had got married and I had kids, white picket fence, golden retrievers. And every time I would get
Golden retrievers. I love that.
yeah,
That's what I've
right?
always had.
The best job.
It's great.
Every single thing that I was told, if you do this, right, then you've made it, or then it looks like success, and I would always get to the next milestone and be like, is this it?
Yeah.
It was this inner feeling. So from there, I kind of started to look for a job, and none of that really felt right, but I knew I had to do something to get back on my feet. So I did find, another job in sales in the industry that I was in, but I knew that it was just a band-aid or a bridge to where I was going, but yet I wasn't quite ready to make
That leap.
all of those leaps. Yeah. But what I went on a yoga retreat as I came out of it, right? And that is what opened my eyes to, I traveled to Nicaragua by myself and went to this week-long yoga retreat and met all these women. There was one guy, but all these women that were doing the same thing. We were all on like this journey to figure out who we were at that point in our life.
Yeah.
And what it also made me realize then was, wow, like this coming back to yourself, retreats, connecting with people, these were all things that I'd been missing in my life. So that's when I started to get these messages about this is what you need to be doing. You're going to help people through this process of, healing. And I just started to really resonate with that.
It's so beautiful, and I want to just because oftentimes it is a catastrophic event that can catapult us into that deeper knowing of who we are, right? Get out of the egoic mind, and because it is in that pain that the phoenix rising, where I always say this, and I know it's not popular because I've been a therapist close to 30 years, but it is in that deepest darkness when we really kiss the bottom of that well that we get closer to the truth of who we are, right? The essence, the spirit, the love. We are love at our essence, at our core. And then this life that's such an illusion takes over and we forget who we are. And this awakening that because I do believe we're all here to be of service to each other. So I want to back up about the awakening, though, because I think that this is really important for our listeners who may be in the deep throes of grief and things do feel they can be in the depths of despair. You said that you had the three, right? You lost your brother, your marriage, and your job. Did they really happen all at the same time, or was there some sort of sequential order where, they started to it was like a domino effect where one catastrophic event sort of led to the changes in the hour. So like the tower in the tarot deck, right? Like the true tower where your life just sort of comes crashing down.
Oh, yeah, it goes beyond that. It's even in my astrology chart, like
Yeah.
to the T that's when it was going to happen. I
Mm.
wasn't going to miss it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe I've set it up that way, maybe. But no, I was already going through the divorce, and part of that
Okay.
was the struggle around alcoholism. It was in my marriage,
Got
and
it.
I'm watching my brother, basically destroy himself, and it's also in my marriage, and I just couldn't tolerate that anymore. So I moved out. And then, I didn't expect him to pass like that. He fell, he hit his head. I knew he was sick. We were always very hopeful he would pull out of it, but it's like it was still abrupt the way it happened, right? And then the job was just, hard to say. I mean, I was struggling with my boss. Like we just didn't have a good
Yeah.
relationship. So whether it was a domino, but yeah, it was all in a 3 month period.
So
So,
then, so you go into your, you go into your grief cocoon, so to speak, for a few months. You emerge, you get a new job, you go, and I'm imagining that did you get the job before you went on to your yoga retreat in Nicaragua?
yeah, I had just, I think I had gotten the job like in late October, and I had said, that I was going to go on this. I already kind of knew like New Year's. So it was just a couple months after. So everything was still, I was still very deep in the healing process and still learning a lot about myself. And also, as much as I was becoming more aware of, what I'd been running from and stuff, there was still like, there's this aspect when you go through this awakening process and you start to gain all this knowledge, you almost get on a high.
Mm.
But there was still so much buried trauma that even after that, I was still kind of running from it, to be honest.
Yeah,
Mm.
no, and I appreciate that. That's, yeah, the level of that. It's the honesty, it's the true journey, and as you called it, the dark night of the soul. So you come back from this retreat, and I'm imagining it takes quite a while to absorb, right, an experience like that. And so tell us what happened when you came back. So you've made these connections, you've had some awareness, and what I like to call is raising your vibration, your frequency.
Yeah.
And so now you've come back, you're in this job, right? Because you've got bills to pay and things to do. What does that next 12 months of your life look like?
It's so crazy because so I'm a big reader. I wake up, I love my morning time. I love early mornings. It's like I can almost like wake up and immediately just start absorbing knowledge. So that's when I was doing a lot of my learning. I would wake up, I'd read these books, and this is when I would start to get all these intuitive messages. Like, for example, the word noble came to me. I was reading, I don't know what it came from, but I wrote it in my phone. I pulled my phone over and I wrote noble because just the word, there was something
Yeah.
about the word that struck me. So I wrote it in my phone. And I just kept, as I was learning about, like, I started following Abraham Hicks and learning about the law of attraction. And I'm thinking to myself, if our thoughts create our reality, then no wonder I've been like completely sabotaging myself by shoving all my thoughts down. So I'm learning all this stuff and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, why aren't we teaching any of this? So I just kept getting more and more passionate about what I wanted to do, but yet I'm still in this job. So I'm still battling what I should be doing or what everybody says I should do, because that's the right thing to do, versus being pulled towards my mission.
Hmm.
And so the next 12 months, I think I actually stayed 2 more years in this job, even though I knew from the beginning I was still battling the when is it going to be safe to let it go? When is it going to be safe to let it go? And so it was almost 2 years. I didn't quite make it 2 years, but I finally, like, I just couldn't do it anymore because, like you said, with frequency, you're trying to be logical, right? And
Yes,
it's not logical.
exactly.
It literally vibrates out of your reality. So if you're trying to stay in a situation, a relationship, a job, an experience that just literally at your core gut doesn't feel right, it's because you've ascended in consciousness above that, if that makes sense. And so that's what
Absolutely.
I've done. But I'm still like, I'm grasping to hold on to something because I'd had so much grief and loss that I didn't, it was like I was almost afraid to let go of something else. Oh my God, I got something back, a job. This is giving me a little bit of stability. So now I got to hang on to this, you know?
Well, and I think I want to pause there for a moment because I think that when we have had a profound loss, and even if we have not, that when we have outgrown something, and when I say outgrow, I'm talking spiritually outgrown, I'm talking about the vibration, the frequency, and we stay in things past the expiration date because we're afraid. And for some people, I mean, it's, most of us need our paycheck, right? We need to pay our bills, we need to buy food, we need health insurance, all the things that can really make us feel like we're in prison. And even though, we can say it's a self-made prison, and that we're the ones that hold the key, locking ourselves in or setting ourselves free, it's terrifying because it requires a deep trust, a deep knowing, a deep trust that is not supported in our culture, right? It's just not. For those people that have a massive bank account and they've got all this money, it's easy to walk away from a job, right? Easy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, but we know that when we are not in alignment with what we're doing, we don't feel good. And that can manifest in physical illness, in
Yeah.
mental illness. It can show up a lot of different ways for us.
I
And
love
it's
that.
that, huh?
I love that you're saying this. Yeah. You're just
Yeah,
words out of my mouth. Yes.
yeah. And so it's that trust, and that trust is not trusting anything external. It's trusting the deeper knowing, but we can only get to the deeper knowing if A, we believe that we have a deeper knowing, and B, that we create the space and the quiet to connect because there's so much noise around us all the time. And the biggest noise is
Is
mental.
yes.
So, with that, knowing that now you're like, okay, I can't do this anymore because the pain it was more painful to stay than it was to leap into the unknowing. So, talk to us when you took the leap into the unknowing. Were you doing this simultaneously? Were you were you creating something while you were still in the job? What was going on in your grief journey? The loss of your brother? Did you have supports? I have all these questions, so go for it.
Yeah. Again, this was part of it is no. Well, yes, I had support, but I am the person that doesn't ask for help. I can do this on my own, right? And so I didn't necessarily build a support system as much as I went into total Capricorn mode. I'm a Capricorn.
So,
Yeah,
what's your birthday?
really. Yeah, January 11th.
Oh my gosh, mine's December 29th. Okay, keep going.
So there you go, right? Like, okay, so you
Yes.
really knocked me off my mountain, but that's fine because I'm just going to climb right back up the next one. So I started doing that. And so, but yeah, so back to where we were, I was not resonating with the job. I was doing it and actually even testing my manifestation skills that I'd learned, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to go out and cold call people. I'm just going to believe that I'm going to make my sales number. Worked, like it literally works. So I was like, all right, this is working. But the problem I was struggling with was there was no creativity. I'm not helping anybody, right? Like I'm that. So the what was happening was I was getting all the intuitive hits of the mission, the purpose that I was here for. And I'm seeing clearly that what I'm doing is not aligned. And I'm feeling it in my body. Like, I mean, you can't even describe it. It was like torture almost. So what do? I go big. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to pack up all my shit and throw it in storage. And I'm going to Europe by myself. So that's what I did. And everybody, like you said, it was like, are you sure you want to do that? Like you're going to quit your job. What about your house? I was renting a place. So the lease was up. So I kind of just timed it simultaneously. But at this point, like I said before, I was still kind of running from some of my emotions because that amount of grief and trauma, it's your body truly can only handle so much. So what I did was I handled enough to get me moving forward. And a lot of times, even negative emotions have an energy behind them. So they propel you. So I'm still kind of using a lot of that energy to make decisions. And I'm in my whole new spiritual, woohoo, I've got this whole new life. I can do all this. I trust the universe. And so I did that, which was very drastic. And interestingly, because of the depression and stuff, I had been on antidepressants for years. So this is part of this is I weaned myself off because now I've got all these tools and I don't need to be on it anymore. And I can do this too. I can do it all. because I'm spiritual now. And so I
I
wean
just have to say, I love you. Keep going.
so I wean myself off of these antidepressants before my journey to Europe, and I'm doing really good. I'm all confident. I've got this. Like, I made it through my dark night of the soul. And I go to Europe and I went to 7 different countries. I
Oh,
didn't
wait,
really,
I have a question because I know everybody out there is wondering. So when you're making this, you are spiritual, you've got your halo, you've got your cape, and you're flying off to Europe. Are you going there to eat, love, and pray your way through Europe, or are you going there to live? What are you doing in Europe?
I think it was the Eat, Pray, Love. I actually think I watched that movie. And then there's one other movie like that. Is it Magnolias? I forget what there was 2 movies that I watched and I was like, wow, that's totally what I'm doing. I'm going on this like spiritual journey. And I had certain places I knew I wanted to visit, but the only thing I really planned was my first stop. So I started in Paris and I went to 7 different countries. And of course, like a Capricorn would, in like just over 8 weeks, just let's just cram it all in, right? But I didn't really have an end date. So here I am running in my nervous system. And I've never been to Europe. I've never been to all these different countries where people don't speak English. And I'm wondering why the whole time I'm there, I'm not feeling grounded. But I still wasn't connecting the dots that it had anything to do with the fact that I went off my antidepressants. And I just threw myself into a situation that was just like too much unknown. And I didn't have any chemicals to help me. So my boys came out for a couple weeks, which was amazing. So the trip was amazing, but I came back early because something didn't feel right. And I thought, you know what, I just got to get home and just kind of reposition myself. So I flew back and I got home and then I fell apart again for 3 more months.
Yeah,
And
okay. That's this. I was wondering. I thought that perhaps that might happen. So you come back and you crash. And I think it's important too for listeners to hear that too around taking yourself off meds. And, because I think that there's still all of the stigma attached to medication. And sometimes medication really can save people, I guess I want to say. And then my guess is eventually you really did get. Anyway, I'm not going to leap ahead if in your story. Continue. So you come back, and when you say you fall apart, what does that mean? Because
well,
now you've left your job, right? So now you do not have a job to return to. This house, you had a home to come back to, right? Because you were renting it, but you said the lease ran out. So where did you come back to?
I came back to a girlfriend who I had stayed with like before I left for a couple.
Okay.
I come back to her and I'm just and it still honestly hadn't connected the dots yet that it had anything to do with the antidepressant. I think it was just a combination of things. So what I want to say, what I think people really do need to realize, and I'm not a grief specialist, but what I learned was you do need stability within a grieving process. So don't do what I did and throw away every aspect of stability because you're going to change your life. You will, but take your time. It is such a long journey. And to this day, we're 6 years later, and I still have triggers of grief from then that come up. And I know because I've done so much work, oh, wow, here's a layer of still from that time. So, yeah, the stability was a big component that I just threw away. So, that's what I was trying to do is like, oh, well, as soon as I find a place to live, I'll be fine. And then I'll just get another job and, put a band aid on it and then I'll be fine. And it really was, I did end up having to go back on the antidepressants, which did stabilize me so much. And so, I would say too to people like you do what you have to do. My gosh, if you need to get on meds temporarily, if you need to go to therapy, if you need to go whatever you need to do, you literally have to go into hyper self-care mode. I think I just did like, okay, I'm good. ready to get on with my life now. But that's just me. That's my personality. And that's what these last 6 years I've learned is to back off of myself and just allow what is coming to arrive.
Yeah, I call it surrendering, right? Just surrendering.
I just did
Because,
a podcast on surrendering, letting go
yeah,
of all of
I,
it.
I mean, let's face it, none of us want to feel pain because it's painful. And I had a dear friend who lost her mother very prematurely, very traumatically. And she already really struggled with anxiety. And I remember her looking at me and saying, I don't want to go through the grief process. And I said, here's the secret. No one does. Nobody does. When I lost my brother, I'm a very optimistic human. And I really was very frightened of my grief. I was
Mm.
very frightened of the dark place that I had gotten into. And when I was getting my MFA, I wrote my dissertation on writing through grief, loss, and trauma, worked with kids in prison, the whole thing. And so here I was, and I ended up writing, I was a fiction writer. I ended up writing this nonfiction book on losing a sibling and interviewed people all over the world. And every day I relived my brother's death. It took me 3 years to write that book. Every day I got up and I relived my brother's death. I thought I was never going to get out of darkness. And of course, I had to test my own theory of writing through grief and loss. And what was amazing to me is how hard the work was, how my life transformed over that 3.5 years, and how my brothers never really did the work. I mean, it's been it'll be 8 years in February since my brother passed. And you bring up my brother's name and my other brother can cry, right? We had to fly to Hong Kong. Like there was a whole thing. He was over in Hong Kong when he died. It was horrific. But anyway, it's, I always say we cannot run from grief and loss. It will show up some way. So I'm like, roll with it, roll with it. Emotion is meant to move through us. And when it gets stuck, it really does come out in a whole bunch of ways we do not want. I can promise you that. And I really appreciate you saying that you were fleeing. And I think, I don't know, you didn't use that word, but one of the things after you go through a deep loss, don't make any drastic decisions because I can promise you, I think they say for 2 years, don't do anything drastic. Hang on to what you know, be on solid ground because you feel like you're in quicksand anyway. So I wanted to add to what you were saying because I just really appreciate the authentic truth of what you're talking about and what that looks like, that you didn't wake up one day, had this spiritual awakening, and you were able to sort of bypass and catapult past what really that I want to call it the true soul growth of what happens to us when we allow ourselves to actually feel our way through it.
Yeah. And I think, I just laugh because it's like I can laugh now, right? It wasn't funny at the time, but this is the thing. I believe that triple storm was meant to happen in the way that I would have to go through everything I've gone through so that it just every time I go through an experience, and there's been a lot of them even since, it literally strengthens my message, it strengthens my mission, and it strengthens my ability to teach people what to do or what not to do, because that's the only way we learn, right? And it's like, so if I can help guide others on their path dealing with, like, just giving them permission to feel, whether it's grief like we're talking about or anything else, god, it's just so normal and so human, and there's no like expiration date on it. There's no timeline to, oh, I have to. Or even healing in itself, sometimes I like to say, like, are you ever really healed? No, it's like there's just this process of allowing emotions to come up. And grief, you said this earlier, and I love that you said this because I feel this way. It's not just the loss of a loved one, a death. Grief is like you apply for a job that you really want. Let's say you interview and then you don't get it. That's grief, right? You meet a guy and you're excited about him and you're interested in him and you go on a few dates and all of a sudden he ghosts you. that's grief. Like we have to start looking at all these things that happen in our life are levels of loss and grief. And how do we get through that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, 'cause the first thing that comes to mind is when you're giving those different scenarios, it's that first is that rejection and the grief over that rejection. And then underlying that is this, it's tied somehow to our sense of self-worth, right? And then we spiral into this really horrific place around, oh, we go from we didn't get an interview for the job to we're not worth taking up space in the universe, right? I mean, it sort of is what I call it
The story.
catastrophizing.
It's the story,
It's the
right?
story. It's the story. Exactly. Instead of, hey, guys, everyone knows that old adage, when one door opens, another one, I mean, when one door closes, another one opens, instead of looking at that rejection as a gift, which, let's face it, we have to still feel the feels, right? We are going to feel the rejection like, why wasn't I good enough? How come I didn't get the interview? Why didn't the guy like me, et cetera, et cetera. But we have to feel that, then we have to move beyond that, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So going back to your story, which I'm loving every minute of this. Okay, so you come back, you fall apart. When do so you're following the breadcrumbs, right, of the calling of, you're probably imagining that you've gotten into meditation at this point and you're meditating on a daily basis and you're doing the things. You come home, you get back on your medication, you stabilize yourself. What happens next?
Yeah, that's when I really began the process of creating the business. It was just like, it's time. Like I still had a little fear. Here's what I was doing. I was like, I was creating the business. And at the same time, I'm like, but maybe I should get another job just in case. And all the jobs I would interview for, and I would get to a certain point and then gosh, they just didn't seem to work out for some reason. And so I finally just surrendered and I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And let's just start building what this is going to look like. But back up a little bit, while I was traveling in Europe, or slightly before I left, my youngest son, came to me. And this is how Noble One actually came to become a business. Was he said, because we both have this passion for fashion. And he was like, Mom, we should start a streetwear brand. And I'm like, oh, I still had my job at the time. I'm like, I love that. I'm like, well, what are you thinking? Like, let's talk about it. And then that's when I remembered the word noble. And I was like, what do you think of the name Noble? And then he liked it. And I said, but Noble One, and one meaning unity, one meaning we're going to build this brand on this platform of mental health awareness. And because that was like this crisis that was already going on, and he's had some struggles as well with his journey, and that's what we'll build it on, the brand. So that's how we came up with the name Noble One. Noble being like, we're going to help people realize the highest version of who they are, right? And we're going to exemplify noble qualities, integrity, and noble character, and we're going to gather all these people as one in a community. So the idea starts coming together. Then we get the logo, and then before he flew out, he brought some t-shirts. We ran a quick thing of t-shirts. And then I met who is my business partner, is no longer, but through a friend, and she had similar interests of helping people and working with youth. We actually started out thinking it would just be kids. So when we got back, I got back, her and I created the brand, and we started with coaching because we felt like this is where we can make an impact right away, is helping people. And gosh, it's shifted so many times since then. The messaging, I tried to hide behind mental health awareness, social and emotional learning. I tried to, being a sales chick, I'm going after the Department of Education, the Department of Mental Health, or Behavioral Health, the Department of, I'm going in, barking up all the trees that were not resonating. I mean, that took a year to figure that out. Like, so what I'm saying is, like, as you're creating your life and things shift, and a lot of times some huge grief scenario like mine will be the catalyst to change your life, my gosh, just take your time and just trust the process, because I've shifted so many times since then and I still am.
I mean, this feels like we just came full circle. So I'm going to ask you my last question. And my last question is, what does self-love look like for you now?
I mean, for me, I think it's probably one of the hardest things that I've had to learn, and I'm getting better at it. But it truly is in every moment where you want to go outward to find the answer, right? Or it's still that like someone else is doing something to you or something's not working out. It's always just coming back to hands on your heart, taking a breath and just affirming, like, I'm okay. Like, I've made it this far. And every time I reflect back and look at where I was and where I am and what I've accomplished, how have I done that? Like, there's something out there way bigger than me that's surrounding me, that's guiding me, that is love. And so all I have to do is remember that is the essence of who I am. So coming back to a self-love practice is just, from my perspective, which is always going to be like through the emotional awareness journey, it is having the most grace and compassion for that inner child, the essence of who you are, just extending that love back to yourself, because we all can give it. We're taught, right, to go out and like be nice to them and take care of them and write them thank you notes and all of it. We're all like always out giving it. But gosh, come back to yourself. If we all extended as much as we gave back to ourselves, like, what a different self concept we would all have. So I'm still learning. I'm really still learning the self love journey, but it is key to this whole process. So I would highly recommend starting like with self love and meditation.
Yeah. Kristen, thank you so much. Where can people find you? I'm guessing that your Instagram channel is Noble One, right?
Yeah. So Instagram is at Noble One Coach. And through there, like if you click my link in the bio, that kind of takes you to everything. But my website is nobleones.com. And then I've got a podcast, which is Noble Ones. And it's so
I'm gonna
crazy.
have to start listening to your podcast.
Yeah. My podcast has been so healing for me. And I love that we're doing this because it turned out, and I just started it in August, but I really realized like it's actually like healing me more to just get on and talk about like the things that happened to me during the week. And I'm going to get guests on soon. But the more we just talk about this stuff, the more it like strengthens it within you. And you just know you're inspiring people. You know there's people out there that you're going to connect to. And I feel like I know you. I feel like I've known you. Maybe it was in another lifetime, but we'll have to continue this conversation off the podcast.
100%. And so with that, I want to thank everybody for coming. I love you guys. I so much appreciate you showing up week after week. And if you have a story, remember to email me, leapwithsusan@gmail.com. And we'll see you guys here next week. Bye for now.
Thank you.